Hey everybody, Hickbilly Outdoors, DW Verts here. My first cast of the morning. Kind of a late start, but there's a reason for that. A reason on purpose. I'm gonna fish quite a ways down the bank and dam here to where I'm potentially hoping to catch some good bass today. I thought I might try to share a story with you. You may not like it, it may bore you to tears, but story about me and how I got started and all this stuff, and hopefully you'll like it. Hopefully I'll tell it where it's fairly interesting. I'll be back with you in just a minute. So my first summer fishing with artificial baits on the creek near the house showed me that there was some bass. I didn't even know what they was at first. Neighbor called them a white bass, and so it was new to me. And we were going to be having a church get together at our parsonage, and our parsonage was on a 4 or 5 acre lake in a subdivision. So I knew it had bass in it. So the night before we went, I asked my neighbor who's going to go fishing with me he was going to town, and I asked him to pick me up a plug. It's funny, here we go, I'm talking about that. I wanted a plug, and what I was thinking of when I told him what I wanted was this right here. I wanted a crankbait. That's exactly what I was thinking about, a big O style crankbait, because I'd seen them, and I know nothing about bass fishing, but I wanted a plug. I knew this lake had bass in it. Well, he shows up next morning with this weird looking concoction. It was a topwater plug with 2 big spinners on it. It was actually a South Bend Nippaditty. Well, I wasn't real happy with it, but still, we were going bass fishing. It's a bass plug. It just wasn't what I was thinking. So we go out to this lake, never fished for bass. I had my 202 reel and probably maybe a 2-piece solid fiberglass rod. It was definitely a 5.5 foot solid fiberglass pole. Probably the original 10-pound junk line that come on there. I'm sure I had a snap swivel, because that's all I did the first year or so. And I put that bait on and commenced to getting bit. Oh my gosh. No big bass. The biggest bass I caught that day was 13, 14 inches long. I missed a bunch of them. I lost them. But they was liking that Nippaditty. And I was, first off, stuck on bass fishing right there in the spot. And secondly, my love for topwater fishing. Heck, maybe that's primarily was the big deal. Fell in love with it. And a side note, we went back the next day and never got bit. Teach a lot about bass fishing, about topwater fishing. I fished the creek some with that topwater that summer. I don't remember much about it. What I do remember was come fall, the church was having a work day at the church itself, and Dad was going to be working with them, and I got to go again. And this time I bought some more bass tackle. I bought my first plastic worms, no clue. And I had that crankbait I wanted. I had a Bomber 6A in a crappie pattern. It was a clear with a coach dog. And the thing I remember most about that day, it was late September. The first real cold front of fall was coming through. It got chilly, it was rainy. I remember the first bass I ever caught on a plastic worm. And before the day was over, I was chunking that crankbait, probably digging the bottom in 4 foot of water, and it got bit, and this bass jumped. I'll never forget that bass jumping. And I had my first bona fide good, and it weighed about 2 pounds an ounce, I believe. But it was a solid keeper bass, and that was horrible for a 13-year-old boy. All I could do was think about fishing. Here it was fall, almost winter. So, and back then we had winters in Missouri. I mean, we still do, but there was no fishing for a kid with his 202 reel and all that. So, that winter, the Bassmaster magazine came out on the newsstands, like it did about January every year, I guess, and it was the Bassmasters Classic issue. And guys, I'll never forget, it was a January evening, certainly cold outside, probably cold in my bedroom. My bedroom had very little heat back in. And I remember laying on my bed, reading every word of that Bassmaster magazine, every word, about how Rick Clunn had won his second in a row, all these names new to me, all the stuff I was reading, all the techniques. And I remember the second that I decided I wanted to be a professional bass fisherman. And how's that for a waste? Like this little bass I'm catching. Oh, anyway, he's interrupting the story, isn't he? What a shame to get interrupted. He's a little bit, whatever, it's a start. Big fat thing. So I'll be back. We'll finish this story after I turn him loose. It seems fitting I'm catching bass while I'm telling these stories, I guess. So there I was. I wanted to be a professional fisherman. Folks, that was the wrong thing to want to do in 1977, winter of 77, 78. It meant nothing to nobody except me. That's not what a teenage kid did back then. I kept that dream with me for a lot of years. I guess still sometimes I dream about it. That spring, for my birthday, my parents bought me a better rod and reel. It was an ultralight. It was those first Daiwa mini spin cast ultralight 6-pound line. I think it wasn't even hardly a 5-foot rod, but anyway, it was a better rod and reel than that 202. And I worked it out pretty hard. I caught quite a few bass on it before I realized how the capabilities of it weren't enough. That's also the time I threw my first spinner baits, my first real bass. I remember that spinner bait was so big, I couldn't believe a bass would hit that thing. And I caught one like my third cast with it that spring at that same lake again. And just hooked through and through. I couldn't handle it. It was so great. I upgraded later that spring to my first bass rod. It was I think it's a 5-foot 3-inch Bass Pro Shop mean green stick. It's a tubular fiberglass rod. It was meant for bass fishing, pistol grip, pretty rod, unless you don't like green. I put a Zebco 33 on it. I remember first thing I put on the 33, I put a hog handle on it, a bigger handle, because that's what I wanted. And guess what? I'm setting trends at 14 years old. With that pole, it had some power to it. I became a better fisherman. And so one more story on this part of it was I caught bass all spring, no big bass. I lost some. I had some strikes. I still remember this day. The first hollow body frog I'd ever thrown was the snag proof frog. I guess unless the Bill Plummer Super Frog it was sponge. Anyway, and there was no hook and bass on them dull hooks on that hollow body snag proof frog with my still light tackle. There's no way. Boy, I had some big fish bite it though. If I only knew then. So it was May 4th of that year. And how's that for memory? I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday. Did I have lunch yesterday? Fishing those same lakes. And there's 3 of those lakes. And I was fishing the second one this day. And the bass were spawning May 4th. I mean, you could see them. If I knew anything, the big bass were chasing brim out through that lake in the moss. And it was pretty cool. And I chucked in a spinner bait and I caught a bass that weighed, I think it was 215. So I had my new personal best, my new biggest bass. Isn't that cool? And that's what you try to do to this day. You try to always catch your next biggest bass. So that was great. It wasn't very long later, though, I caught one that weighed 3.1 or 3.2. A few ounces bigger bass. And I am tall cotton. Man, just grinding out, having a great time. And I put a jitterbug on, which I'd fell in love with the jitterbug. Something fierce, and a hula popper even. And I remember the cast. I threw that jitterbug across. I was on an island. I threw the thing across the north, come cranking back, and just about the middle of that channel on that side, I can see the strike. I can see the bass jump. And I got that bass in. It was 4 pounds, 4 ounces. And that was my new biggest bass. Plus, that was bona fide good one for me. A 4-pounder, that's not a bad mark to this day. Hooked through and through. For whatever it's worth, either ruined me or it made me. Folks, what it did do, I never had any desire to do drugs or drink. I chased some women, but it never got in the way of my fishing. I guarantee it. I chased too many women, played some music, but I never had nothing get in the way of that dream for years and years. It finally took a married family and all that to make me give up on it. Oh, there's another one. Keep getting interrupted by these bass. What a horrible thing to have happen. Well, I'll get this one took care of and I'll finish this story up. If I'm boring you guys, sorry. I'm memory lane. That's what we do. A little fatter fish, a little bigger fish. I don't know if you can see that view. How's that for a 60-foot drop in the spillway? So that's the story, the first part of my progression to being a bass fisherman. There's been a lot of fun times, a lot of kind of not so fun times. I remember more of the fun stuff. I met some really cool people over the years. I fished with some of the best, there's another bass bit me right there. I fished with some of the best bass fishermen in the world, actually, over the years. I've been personal friends with one of the top 10 ever in the world in Geet Hibden. I don't care what you say, one of the best ever, innovator. And so the memory's been pretty good. Now I'm kind of getting old and broke down and beat up, and I do it almost exclusively for fun now, but I still do it. So there's my story. Hope y'all like it. If it was boring, maybe, oh my gosh, another fish. This may get to be too much for me today, guys. I just can't handle all this fun. So I'm going to sign off. I'm Dale Verts. It's not hot out here yet. Nice little breeze blowing right now. Oh, good. He turned himself loose right now. You may wish he was me. God bless you guys. Thanks a bunch.